Sydney, they were welcomed by Cardinal Moran. So while some MSCs continued on to Papua New Guinea, others stayed in Sydney to found the first Australian houses. The congregation is now a worldwide family, with men working on every continent. There are MSCs in Brazil and Guatemala, the US and South Africa, in Germany, Indonesia, India, the Philippines. In Japan, Australian MSCs work with the Catholic community, seeking ways of living the gospel in a largely non-Christian culture. And in Papua New Guinea, Australian and local MSCs work to bring justice to people living in a largely third world economy. And today in Australia itself, there are nearly 300 MSCs working in parishes, education, amongst Aboriginal people, overseas missions, and in a variety of other areas of ministry. While the language and piety of the past, which spoke of devotion to the Sacred Heart, is changing, the vision of Jules Chevalier remains unchanged. MSCs believe that if people learn to know their own hearts, their own hopes and gifts and fears, then they'll more readily know the heart of God, which reaches out with acceptance and compassion to all.
The heart of my life as an MSC is to spend time during the course of each day in contemplation of the heart of Christ, just to sit with him and to see how he loved, how he regarded people, how he touched people, and to allow the experience of that to touch my own heart, and in a sense to transform me, to make me more Christ-like, to be more loving, to be more compassionate, to be more understanding.
MSCs to me are people who believe that there is a God who loves them, and therefore each individual is worthwhile.
For over 100 years, the MSCs have sought to live out this vision in the Australian context. As we enter the 21st century, that context is changing rapidly. To serve this new world requires a constant concern to bring the compassion of God into the real circumstances of people's lives. Throughout Australia, MSCs have established a number of places for quiet, rest and prayer, where visitors can step aside from their busy lives to meet God. Here at Douglas Park, just south of Sydney, the MSCs offer formal and informal retreats for people who are searching and for those who want to make relaxed, quiet contact with their God. Increasingly, the people who come here are seeking relief from the stresses and confusion of modern life. The main house at Douglas Park, St Mary's Towers, was originally built by New South Wales Surveyor General Sir Thomas Mitchell in 1860. It was acquired by the MSCs in 1904 and is now the focus of a variety of activities that Sir Thomas would not have dreamed of. Husband and wife John and Sheila Wigham, together with Therese Curtis, Jacinta Sinclair, Gay Puglisi and MSC Frank Anderson, are experimenting with a new way of living in community. It's a lifestyle in which the old distinctions between clerical and lay, married and single, are seen as vocational gifts and not as divisions.
I come out of an experience as someone studying liturgy and being in religious life and being in the official side of the church for the last 25 years, realising that by and large, in my experience, that type of church is a little bit out of touch with things. And the way to begin again is to perhaps share the territory with people who can bring to this religious life experience something that's fresh and vital for today.
Members of the community have been drawn here by their own experience of a spirituality of the heart. This experience begins in the search to understand one's own heart. In our emotions, struggles and ambitions, we can come to understand the heart of Jesus, whose own human experience led him to compassion and understanding for all.
I first began to experience heart spirituality 20 years ago when our eldest son began to attend an MSc college in Canberra, and my experience has always been of great encouragement and affirmation. So to me, that's a big part of heart spirituality: acceptance, encouragement, affirmation, love.
as I come to know who I am and as I come to know the people who live here with me, and discover how much alike we are, when it really comes down to it, how much we share in common, how much of our hoping and how much of our despairing is shared. There seems to be a recognition that somehow in my own heart and in what we share together, I don't know, there's a common experience that when you reflect on the Gospels is common with the heart of Jesus. Before you, my God.
The influence of Eastern spirituality can be found at Douglas Park too. A few kilometres from St Mary's Towers, Father Vin Bailey has established an ashram. Ashram is an Indian word meaning a place of rest. Father Vin is a yoga teacher who set up this retreat for people wishing to meet God in simple surroundings close to nature. As an MSc priest, his ministry has been enhanced by his knowledge of yoga, an ancient system of physical, mental and spiritual discipline originating in India.
They have deepened and have simplified. The two words, I think they really mean the same thing, because the deeper you go, the more simple things become. The heart. The heart, we speak of the Sacred Heart, the heart of Jesus, all that sort of thing. The heart is the centre of the emotions. The heart as the centre of courage, the stout-hearted fellow, all those sort of things. But for the Indians, the heart is the place where you meet God. Jesus said, if you want to pray, go into your room, close the door and pray to your Father in secret. What we don't seem to realise is the people Jesus was talking to, the workmen and the villagers, the peasants and so forth, they lived in one-room houses, like the people in India do today. You just couldn't go into a private room and close the door. What he was speaking of was going into the heart. As the Hindus say, or the Indians say, he went into the cave of the heart. Hridaya Guha. They say that if you want to pray, if you want to meet God, you don't have to go to a cave in the Himalayas. You have the cave of the heart. And for me, that means now the spirituality of the heart means the place where Jesus met the Father, those prayers. And if I go into my own heart in prayer, my heart, that's where I meet Jesus, and with Jesus, that's where I meet the Father. So I would say that it has given me the deepest, the simplest, the most fundamental understanding of what spirituality of the heart is all about.
At Canterbury, in suburban Melbourne, the MSCs have established another place of quiet and retreat. The Heart of Life Spirituality Centre offers individual counselling and group programs designed to help people explore the needs of their heart and spirit.
I think a key element in all that we do would be what we call heart spirituality. We don't always use those words. We mightn't even call it a spirituality. But it's very much part of our approach that we're interested in helping people touch the goodness in their own hearts. Just knowing really where the depth of God's love touches them.
One policeman is still in hospital, 4 others were injured, and 60 people arrested in the 2-hour brawl.
Contemporary Australia can appear cold and superficial. The hearts of many are broken by increasing poverty, alienation and division. Many people are looking for affirmation and for liberation from the burdens which living in this society can bring. Working amongst the Aboriginal people of the Northern Territory, MSCs strive to empower them to explore the unique impact of the gospel on their culture. Their tradition and spirituality is encouraged as a true expression of their experience of God. MSCs seek to listen to the original gospel insights of Aboriginal people. Here at Bathurst Island, the Tiwi people begin their weekly Eucharist with an old tribal smoke ritual, in which participants are purified and made ready for the celebration ahead. And the celebration it is, featuring lively music, language and dance of the Tiwi culture.
Pastoral right. I own it. What did you make a very Nigella Punagapa? I'm here Manole. I'm here Tanoromai. You only put a photo on the lava. You only put a photo on the lava. Nene.
MSc John Leary sees his role as one of partnership with the Tiwi people. The mission on Bathurst Island is a place neither of paternalism or colonialism. It is rather a contact point between two cultures. Here, the MSc spirit of openness to the human heart strikes a resonance with the Tiwi values of community, simplicity and celebration. The Tiwi have welcomed the MSCs, who have lived with them since the mission was first established early this century. Over the years, the MSCs have been continually invited to be real members of the island community. At the same time, MSCs have encouraged the Tiwi to see themselves as active members of the Christian Church. In this discussion, based on the Lumko method of mission awareness, the people seek new ways of expressing the gospel through their own traditions.
Kita sering share together one day na jualan meet together kita share in one area pakana group and group next day na jualan together.
Working on a mission in the Northern Territory is not an easy task. It's hot and can be isolated. But to John Leary, it has been a tremendous privilege for over 40 years, because he's been invited to be part of a culture which has so much to offer our own.
If you're going to work with Aboriginal people, I think with any people, unless people feel that you are very close to them in very deep friendship or solidarity, you might call it, I don't think you can be effective. And Aboriginal people especially are people, I always say, they're master psychologists. They can tell the phony. They can tell if you're really honest and sincere, you're not looking up or looking down, you're looking straight face to face. And I think that's where an MSc spirituality really lends itself to working with any people, but especially among Aboriginal people. If they can call you really a friend, in the real sense of the word, you've made it. But the longer you're with them, I think the more you realise you don't know. There's a depth there, thousands of years in this country, the depth there that we can't fathom anyway. And most of the time you spend your time listening, just being with them, sharing their friendship, and as regards propagating the faith, I've never been overzealous about pouring things down people's necks. They have many things that are very similar to our Christian faith. Now that simplicity and community and sharing, their considerateness to one another,
You know, after all, what was the Lord's whole teaching about was sharing on that very human level, our friendship, caring for one another.
I didn't talk to, and I want to.
But the relative harmony of life on Bathurst Island does not tell the full story of the Aboriginal people of the Northern Territory.
When I first picked up a drink, and it made me feel, brave, and I was starting to feel a different person.
At 5 Mile, close to the Daly River Mission, MSCs Andy Howley and Alan Kinane coordinate an alcohol recovery program for people from all over the Territory. It's a family-orientated program in which husbands and wives participate, often with their children, so that they can discover new ways of supporting each other on the long road back to sobriety.
We've just seen that video of Quit Tomorrow.
In this context, the MSC spirit seeks to bring real peace to the hearts of those whose lives have been all but destroyed by this terrible disease.
I'll try stay out from grog, be happy, family man, be happy with my wife and my kids.
Now that I'm here doing the program with my husband Danny, my children are much happier around us, and me and Danny talking a lot while we're doing this program, and we're much closer like before. We were just apart, and now that we're on our 4th week, I find that when I go back, and hope that Danny will change, and hope he'll stay like what we're doing now. Be happy and be together with our children.
At Port Keats Mission, 7 hours drive southwest of Darwin, the dialogue between Aboriginal culture and Christian faith is exemplified in the partnership between MSc Xavier Demachelier and married Aboriginal deacon Boniface Purgett.
The longer I'm with them, the more I'm beginning to realise it's a privilege. It's a real personal privilege to be with them. In my own personal journey, I've gone from having a sense of doing things for people to a very deep sense of just being with them. And that's been quite a change from me.
The Aboriginal people at Port Keats especially, the MSC, just like seemed to us, it's a spiritual father to the Aboriginal people, because in the Aboriginal way we see the tribal people. So the MSC came to our people in the early days, so we feel about the MSC is one of our tribe of Aboriginal people.
It's a relational thing, really. I mean, they're extraordinary people in terms of their capacity to relate. Relate who they are and what they are. And I think generally for us it's a struggle to try and understand that that's the way they operate. We're head people, they're very heart people.
Strong in faith. That's the motto of all secondary schools run by the MSCs in Australia. At each school, the aim is to build a community of faith in which students, staff and parents can all participate. The spirituality of the heart means that MSCs place great emphasis on compassion and one-to-one support of students.
I went down with Damien to Douglas Park for the MSC assembly right around Australia, and I think mainly it's just sort of they care. It's a real caring sort of atmosphere about it.
In the boarding school, everyone, you're just treated as an equal. Like there's still a hierarchy, and there's respect between the two different groups, but you're treated as an equal in that all the time, and your opinion is valued, and so it's just good.
Particularly I find in the boarding houses and that, the house fathers and that, you know, it's just some personal touch that you probably won't experience, I don't think, in other schools, and that's what's made the big difference.
I think working with kids in any school environment is a very important thing. It especially works well here because you're 24 hours on, 7 days a week. I feel you really get to know the kids, and being a celibate and being a missionary of the Sacred Heart, I do feel privileged to be father to the children often, so that it's not only in the classroom where I'm teaching French, or on the football field where I'm teaching them how to tackle, or in the choirs as well, but there's always this notion that there's a priestliness and a spirituality that's behind it all, fostering all the time, I feel, the kids' innate talents and potential.
MSCs provide a style of education, a particular style of education that isn't provided elsewhere. I think it's guided very easily by the fact that we have a particular spirituality which stresses the need to care for people in a very personal way, in much the way that Jesus taught us that God cares for us. And I suppose all the philosophies of our schools are based on that premise, that we will provide that type of personal care for each student that comes through our schools.
Every day at school you get tired, we get frustrated with one another. You have the normal things that go on in schools between teachers and pupils, and that's just as you do with parents and children. But the overall impression and teaching is that we do care for each other and we're working at it. We don't presume to have it perfect yet because that's the human condition, but we're working at it. So an MSc school is meant to be basically a happy place and very, very family-oriented rather than another orientation, that's all. And it works.
As at Douglas Park, MSCs working in schools seek to share their ministry with a team of dedicated lay people. Through years of friendship, Liz Phelan and her husband have come to value the MSc spirit. Now they share and promote that spirit as lay people. The compassionate vision of Jules Chevalier is not owned by MSc priests and brothers.
It's exciting to be lay people who feel they can really contribute. I think the barriers are broken down between clergy and laity when that can happen, and when laity feel they can make a genuine and real contribution to the life of the church.
It's a great pleasure to be an MSc associate. Probably I've seen quite a number of changes over the years in MSc schools. For instance, when I first started teaching with the MSCs, I was one of the few lay people amongst a large number of religious. So we were probably the extras there, who gave witness as lay people to the Catholic faith. Since then, things have changed so that the religious are few and far between. There are more lay people there, and I think it's the lay people who need to give the lead now to the students in the development of their own faith. And I think being an MSc associate has helped me to appreciate the philosophy of the MScs, and has given me extra incentive, I suppose, to try to be a witness to that type of faith to the students.
I think I've always been an MSc, and then I found the group.
The tragedy of Lebanon is far more complex than we dare think. The religious rivalries are a smokescreen for a more political agenda. MSc and journalist Paul Stenhouse travels often to this war-torn country and writes freelance for a number of publications in the Australian print media.
Well, I feel under an obligation to try to present the picture as it really is, rather than just go along with this fatalistic, fairly pessimistic presentation of the fact that there's no future for Lebanon. Lebanon must inevitably become a Syrian satellite. Assad is the most powerful person in the region. The Lebanese Christians have no right to exist in their own country, and so on.
Paul is also the editor of Annals Australia, which has been the mainstay of MSc work in journalism for over 100 years. It's a monthly journal of Catholic culture, distributed widely through newsagents, parishes and schools.
There's a certain integrity that you have to have as a journalist, and it's not all that noticeable these days, unfortunately, when the print media particularly and television has all become a branch of the entertainment industry. The old idea of people knowing how to ferret out the truth and to express it well and conscientiously, I think is being played down a bit. But at least as a priest, I've got a certain, and as an MSc, I know that I've got no restrictions on me. And I don't have anything to fear. I can actually go out and find out what's going on and say it without fear of losing my job or without fear of intimidation.
Paul Collins is another MSc working in journalism. In the ABC's Religious Affairs Department, he produces and presents radio and television programs which explore the impact of gospel values and of the church on Australian culture.
Over the years, I've had to discover what it means to be an MSc. Essentially, I think it means freedom. One of the things that I've experienced with the province and with the order has been a real sense of freedom. I've been able to move into what is an entirely new kind of area for a priest. I think I come with a terrific training. I mean, the thing that's really lacking, I think, in a lot of journalism at the present moment is really understanding the deeper issues that affect people. I mean, media tends to see people at a very superficial level. What my training has done, which has come very much from philosophy and theology with the order, is that you're able to see the kind of meaning questions that people are asking. And radio and television are extraordinary ways of being able to project out into a much wider audience, far beyond the church, that whole question of meaning and how people might begin to negotiate an answer to that meaning question.
Joining a religious congregation like the MSCs is not an easy decision. But for some, it's a choice which makes sense of their journey and of their experience of God's call. Mark Hans is a former electrician who finally decided to give the life a try.
I felt the call around about 15, 17 years ago, but I decided then that I had other designs on my life. I wasn't looking at any other commitments, but anything else but being a priest was a better option at that stage. So I did a trade, and I thought if I was going to be a priest, I'd be a priest at the end of the trade, and then I decided at the end of the trade I'd go travelling. Finally, I decided that I'd have to make a decision one way or the other and make a commitment, and then when I made a commitment, for the first time in my life, I really felt like I had a direction, you know.
Do you want a glass of wine, Steve? Can I have a
Those who join the MSCs come to live at Navarre House in the Sydney suburb of Drummoyne. Navarre is a house of formation which offers individual guidance in areas of study and prayer, as well as a communal lifestyle. It's designed to help people depth their own experience of God and nurture their own gifts, so that by living with MSCs, they'll be able to discern how best to live out their vocation in ministry. It's not all study either. The community at Navarre House is committed to live the values of MSC life in simplicity, kindness and good humour. Training for ministry as an MSC priest or brother includes experience in a variety of pastoral situations which help men to discover where they can best witness to the compassion of Jesus. For some time, student priest John Connolly has worked as a chaplain at Sydney's Long Bay Jail.
I find that there's a need to address the structural sin of the system. And this structural sin affects both the prisoners, their families, the prison officers and their families, and it also runs into the general community. Heart spirituality is, I believe, part of an answer. It's a spirituality that calls people to look into their own heart, to look into the heart of Christ, and together to look at the Father's heart. I find that in practical terms that comes down to a person who can accept people, love people with a rugged love, and have a desire to help those people.
Jules Chevalier's was a missionary spirit. He wished to bring the warmth of a living faith to all those who had lost it or had never heard it. At first he thought only of mission to the people of his native France. But within 30 years, MSCs had gone to Papua New Guinea. Paul Duffy is an Australian who continues the century-old MSC tradition in Papua New Guinea. As parish priest of Sugeri, he works amongst the local youth and treks to the outlying villages to assist the people as they develop a truly local church. MSCs in Papua New Guinea try to share fully in the lives of the people and to understand and affirm their traditions and culture. It helps to be a jack of all trades because a missionary is often called on to assist people in fixing the village water pump, or to go by a small boat to outlying islands on pastoral or medical visits. Social justice is also a major concern in a nation whose third world economy can have disastrous effects on the living standard of whole villages and regions.
I had to take off and swim. What else we got to eat when we had these pigs? We've got what?
And as Paul Duffy has discovered, the people of Papua New Guinea have much to teach us about gospel values.
Sense of community. Every village you walk into has everybody's looked after, and looked after. You see that in the way somebody who's sick, even if they're in a city, there's always someone with them in a hospital. In a village, there's no outcast. There's nobody that's really thrown out of the village. Somebody who might be sick physically or mentally or in any way, they're still included in the group. They might be put to the side a bit by some individuals, but overall, anybody is part of the group. The people here have a really strong sense of community. I'd see that as that's what it can offer the church, because people know that. They bring that into the church. It's the way God's worked here for many generations, and the church, I think, supports that part of the culture.
Yeah.
In Papua New Guinea now, there are over 100 indigenous MSCs. Australian MSCs work with them to build a Christian community which truly affirms the humanity of the tribal culture. Paul Duffy's involvement in this rewarding work is the culmination of a long journey.
When I first started thinking about vocation, I was at an agricultural college. I'd left school, I think, 2 years previously, and for that 2 years was a really searching time in my life. I tried lots of different things, and it was no particular thing that made me think about religious life. I suppose I just, being in the country, out from Melbourne, about 200 miles, I got a sense of God, I think, from nature, and that led me through friends at the college to look at the Word of God, and that took me back into a new understanding of church, God and myself, and it was from that I went back down to Melbourne and started thinking about religious life and priesthood, and started making inquiries.
Whether it be in the villages of Papua New Guinea or the quiet suburban streets of Australia, MSCs work to bring alive the Word of God, firstly in their own lives, then in the lives of others, school students and parishioners, work colleagues and parents, adults and even young children.
Father, we should always come and praise you for everything you do for us. And when supper was ended, Jesus took the cup. And again he gave you thanks and praise, Father, and he gave that cup to his friends and said, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is the cup of my..."
In their parish work, MSCs wish to build communities sensitive to the insights of the modern church, especially its sense of concern for justice and its growing acknowledgement of the ministry of lay people.
What 4 weeks' notice?
Well, we have a very active meditation session in our parish. We've run 3 meditation weekends, and they've been conducted by Father Vin Bailey, and we've probably had over 100 people at each session. And as a follow-on of that, we've broken up into meditation groups. It seems to be a very strong part of the parish now. People are very eager to get into it. I suppose that's due to very stressful lives that we lead now. They're keen to seek some sort of quietness in their life.
Here at Park Orchards, east of Melbourne, parishioners share fully in the pastoral care of the needy in the parish. For parish priest Fred Van Gestel, ministry as an MSc can be expressed very simply.
So the spirituality of the heart then is where I am convinced of the love of Christ in my life, and that I'm not afraid to go to every aspect in life to live that. And so one moment you're leading a children's liturgy which is filled with warmth and beauty, and it may happen that very afternoon you're burying a baby who died of cot death. One moment you may be counselling a couple who've separated. That same day you could be looking after a service for a silver wedding anniversary. All those sorts of sharp contrasts. You have to do the monotony of paperwork, which I literally loathe. But with that you have, say, you might be able to spend time in the play yard with the kids. And really that is what I find is the real devotion of the Sacred Heart. Being with people where they're at, where they're suffering, where their joys are.
Peter Hearn is another MSc working in parishes. His ministry at St Mary's Cathedral in Darwin is a constant challenge to live out his vision of what it means to be an MSc.
The MSCs that I met when I was at boarding school, they preached a God who was approachable, a God in Christ who was approachable, who was understanding, who could cope with all sorts of human foibles and characters, who understood the depths of our humanity and wasn't too shocked by probably much that he came across. Yeah, God who's approachable, a God who chooses to draw us by friendliness, by love, by creatively looking at the opportunities, I think, that and the capacities that people have. Yeah, not a God who pushes us down or whatever. He's a God always of possibilities.
With the world and the church changing so rapidly, it's sometimes difficult for young people to find their place in either. The insular Catholicism of their parents' generation is gone, as is the security of those days. Young people today are facing these challenges with new hopes and a new heart. But it takes a special kind of ministry to encourage their efforts. MSc John Shelby, National Chaplain to the Antioch Youth Movement, has found that above all, it's important to listen.
I think the church has really ignored them. It's become irrelevant to a lot of them, and I think we need to be more conscious of their culture in our liturgies and in our relating to them.
Especially with John, one of the first things I ever noticed about him was that he was a very affectionate man, and he's always come up, he's given me a big hug. And
the MSc spirit can never be completely summarised. Based as it is on the movements of the human heart, it will find an original and heartfelt expression in response to new needs. But always it will reflect and draw life from Jesus, who longed to bring peace and reconciliation to all. People inspired by his heart of compassion have much to offer the new world.
Bring the love of God to people. Tell them about the love of God. Doesn't matter what you do, whether you teach, whether you've got foreign missions, whether you've got parish work, or any sort of work with young people or druggies, doesn't matter at all. The important thing is to try and get people to understand the love of God. And for me now, in my late years, that's what a missionary of the Sacred Heart is on about. That's what we're supposed to do.
Create a new heart.